Hi there, my name is Kelley Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. Hey everybody, it's Kelley.
And it's Max.
And we're back for another podcast. And this time, in keeping with it being October and kind of like a scary time, we are going to talk about some of the time-tested superstitions that actors may have, whether you are a film actor or a stage actor, although I will say a lot of these superstitions pretty much generate from theater.
They come from theater, and I actually found something about where some of these superstitions came from. If you do this in a theater, you are going to bring disaster upon the play and all of this stuff. The thing I think is it's kind of human nature. Not just in theater, but, that when something goes wrong, the thing that people want to do is point a finger at some person or some instance and go, that's why this went wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of superstitions, I think, come from.
Yeah, I don't want to take personal responsibility, therefore it must be something otherworldly that's causing this.
It's gremlins, it's the boogeyman, it's something like that. And, and
people whose last names are Grimm.
Well, wherever you stand in your belief or not of kind of, shall we say, in all things woo-woo, I found actually some places where some of these superstitions came from. There's a big one we'll get into in a little bit here. But, you have to keep in mind, I think that if you've ever done live theater and really done it for any length of time, anything can happen on stage. It's, and as I say, it's human nature that if something goes wrong, you want to know who or what did it to you. Even if it is just ridiculous, even if it's just illogical, even if it makes no sense, it's like we have this need to want to assign blame for when things go wrong. And the thing about the theater is that when you're on stage, it's not just your fellow actors, it's a whole bunch of people of strangers in the audience out in the dark who is seeing everything screw up and turn into a giant mess. And I know I've talked about this before, but it's said that the biggest fear, or one of the biggest phobias we have as human beings is public speaking. Well, that's true. However, a bigger one is the fear of public humiliation.
And I think that's dovetails in with public speaking. If you screw up public speaking, then you will have the public humiliation right on that. And yet, and then people fear it more than death. And I'm like, I have yet to have a coroner or hear that the death certificate was stamped cause of death, public speaking.
But a lot of people are scared to death of just plain public speaking. Mm-hmm. And when you get into theater and you're playing the character, you're going through all that character's emotions, and there's a certain amount of vulnerability you need as an actor to make these parts and these characters meaningful and compelling and entertaining and thought-provoking and make people laugh and cry. And it's so you have to have that vulnerability. And if and when something goes wrong, it can be pretty devastating. So it's kind of it's this human nature thing of why this terrible thing happened to me. Oh, it's because the gods or, the witches cursed me or, the gremlins or the boogeyman or the whatever. That's why this went wrong.
The poltergeist in the theater.
The poltergeist. That's something we'll get into in another podcast and probably next week.
Yeah, we're both kind of history, supernatural geeks, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the superstitions in theater, and this stuff goes back a long way. We're talking hundreds of years. There was one superstition: no whistling backstage. Okay, you will bring all kinds of doom and failure onto this production, and the lead actor will break his neck, and this and that and the other thing. Actually, the reason for no whistling backstage is because once upon a time, in the old days, sailors apparently were hired to work backstage, particularly to do like rigging and the guys who do the pulley system of, like the drops coming back in. And it's the same thing as like, raising and lowering sails on a ship.
Wow, that makes total sense.
So what happened was, we're going back into the days where in backstage, you did not have wireless headsets. You didn't have walkie-talkies. You didn't have any of that. So how these sailors would communicate with one another was by whistling. Your cue is coming up and, well, generally, in case you don't know, the way you generally would get cues backstage is like, okay, and curtain pulling, stand by for curtain pulling. And now pull curtain, is how it would go. So there'd be some kind of like, they would just work out these signals and codes between each other of whistling. And if somebody was just arbitrarily whistling a tune backstage, it could screw up the production it could screw up the timing of the curtains and the scrims and so forth being pulled in and out of stage. Actually, practicality of where that comes from. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of put to the people, don't whistle backstage, you'll bring in the evil spirits and stuff like that. So that's where that one comes from.
But it wasn't so much for that. It's like, let's not mess up the cues.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But sometimes they, that wouldn't work on people. So you'd have to do something to put the fear of God into them.
Or the fear of the supernatural.
Or the fear of the supernatural. Another one is, and I remember when I first got into theater, I was doing a lot of like, in addition to acting, I was doing like a lot of backstage and building scenery and hanging lights and stuff like that. There's a thing is when it called a ghost light. And basically what that is, it's a bare light bulb up on a pole. It's just very simple, and it sits in the middle of the stage. It was said the reason you have to put this ghost light on is because if you've ever been to theater, when no one's there, they can be really, really dark places. And there's like a lot of steps and holes in the stage and scenery and stuff like that. It's really, really easy. If you're just wandering around in the dark, it's really easy to get hurt. In order to keep people, the stage crew, it's like, okay, just leave the light on. And the reason for that is because they were told it's going to keep the evil spirits and the angry ghosts at bay. So they won't come in and they won't curse our production. Okay. But it had more of just this practical thing of leave a light on. So when people are wandering around in the dark, they don't fall down and break their neck. Yeah. So there was that.
It's like a nightlight in your house.
Yeah. Exactly. Because honestly, theaters, stages can potentially be some very dangerous places, and you've got to see where you're going. They have these things hanging up, these big heavy things hanging up in the air and all that sort of thing. And if you're sort of wandering around, you can get really, really, really hurt. I knew a guy who actually fell off stage one time, and it just really messed him up. So there was that. Another one, it was blue costumes. You got to ban blue costumes. And the reason the producers told them that was like, it's some kind of a bad omen. It will attract evil spirits. We can't have blue costumes. And that's all they were ever told. The reason for that.
I'm curious about the reason. I have never heard that before.
This goes back a long, long way. Is because back when fabrics were hand dyed, colors like blue and indigo were very, very expensive. Yeah, they were, and somebody would say, well, my costume should be blue. Oh, no, can't do that. You'll bring in the ghosts. You'll bring in
And it was the producers.
It came down to the producers trying to save money. It is what it was, because as Cameron McIntosh said, the guy who produced Les Miserables, said the single...
And any number of musicals.
Yeah, he said that the single most foolish thing you can do with money is to produce theater. That's what he said.
I don't, as someone who's produced theater, I don't 100% disagree with that.
Yeah. But the whole thing about blue costumes and all the evil crap that would rain down upon your production if you wore blue costumes, it came down to money. They didn't want, the stuff was hard to come by. And when you did find these hand-dyed blue or indigo fabrics, they were prohibitively expensive. That's where that one came from.
So I would imagine if you used beets as dye and other things for dyed cherries and things like that, those weren't nearly as expensive if you used vegetable dye. Okay, that makes sense.
Another one, no mirrors on stage.
Okay.
No mirrors on stage because mirrors are a portal into the other worlds, and the spirits can get in and mess up your production and bring all this bad luck. No, the reason for that, no mirrors on stage, is because actual mirrors on stage create a nightmare for lighting designers. That's all that was. It's just, and just and so any sort of thing that was supposed to be a mirror, it would not have the reflective surface. But you kept mirrors off stage just because, and I can tell you, I was going to do a show one time in the middle of an art gallery, and so many of the pieces around were actually had like components of mirrors on them. And it's like, there's no way this lighting is going to look right. It's going to be one screwed up thing after another, after another, after another with these mirrors on stage. So that's where the no mirrors on stage came from. Just the practicality of don't make the lighting designer's job any more difficult than it already is.
And, just as an improviser and maybe kind of a Weisenheimer, I'm thinking you also don't want audience members looking in the mirror and seeing themselves and having somebody making faces and trying to upstage the actors from their seats.
Yeah.
From there, or, God forbid you have audience members falling asleep and the other people in the audience can see that. So I can totally see all that.
I remember there was a production of Chorus Line that at the very end of the show, they had this giant mirror that comes out. And that, from what I've never been involved in a production of Chorus Line, but from everything I've heard from people that had that, the whole getting this giant mirror thing right is supposed to be an absolute technological, just logistical nightmare.
Yeah, because the optical illusion of that is you have, I think, the 15 or 18 actors who are in the chorus line, and then you have the mirrors, so it looks like chorus line upon chorus line upon chorus line.
Yeah.
So, it looks like you have maybe 100 people on stage rather than just the original ones. But yeah, I could see that being a real cluster cuss.
Yes.
Shall we say.
Okay. Another one. And I'm totally behind this one. The last rehearsal before the opening is called the final dress. And I get this, psychologically, I get this, but your last final dress tech rehearsal has got to really suck and be terrible. That's where you want all the mistakes to come out, because it's got to be bad, because if you knew you had a bad final dress tech, your opening night was going to be great.
Yes.
And psychologically, I get that. I get that so much.
Because if everything that can go wrong will go wrong in the dress rehearsal, you can troubleshoot it for performances.
Yeah, get it out of the system, in those last couple of rehearsals. And really, I mean, whatever, stinky performances and missed light cues and scenery not coming in and out, and I can remember actually people in some of the shows that I was in, it was getting towards opening night, and we were having like really good dress tech rehearsals. People were like, okay, this is not good. We've got to really suck in these dress tech rehearsals. We've got to really blow it bad. And I get that. It's like, get all your last mistakes, get all your last, inconsistencies or whatever. Just get them out and deal with them now before opening night. It's just, I get it. I get it.
I also think it's that nervous energy is going to have you be alert. If you had a dress rehearsal that was kick butt, there's going to be a sense of complacency.
Yep.
And that's always like they say, you have opening night, then there's the second night letdown, because you have all that energy. And any play that I've done, I have found that second night you are working twice as hard as opening night to try to have it be where it needs to be, because you had that opening night, it was so great, and then there's that second night letdown, and then and then you kind of go from the second night letdown to, oh my God, guys, we've got to do so much better, and then people kind of have that opening night mindset.
That's generally how it generally went. Is that final dress tech would be terrible, opening night would be fantastic, the second night would be like, what just happened?
Are we even doing the same play?
Yeah, it's
I was not paying attention. I was thinking about where we were going to eat afterwards. Should I have been paying attention?
It's like what am I going to have to eat after the show, or what movie am I going to watch when I get home, and this and that.
Was that my cue?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was that my cue? Oh my God, did I just jump to Act 3? I'm enrolling in Act 1.
Oh, I've seen it happen, kids. I've seen it happen.
I'm guilty as smarged.
Yeah. Here's another one. Entirely psychological. And this, from anything I've ever researched, they can't really figure out where this came from. Basically, when you leave your dressing room, when you cross over the doorway or the threshold of whatever of your dressing room, you lead with your left foot. And then when you walk to the stage, and when you go to make your first entrance, you enter on your right foot, or basically whatever your dominant foot is. And the idea of that is like, you don't want to leave the dressing room on your best foot. You want to leave the dressing room on your weaker foot, and then when you step on stage, that's when your strength and your dominance and your power and your good acting chops, that's when that comes in. And that's a minuscule little thing, but some people are really that is, they're very much just like, okay, I'm leaving the dressing room, I have to leave on my left foot and then walk to the stage and stand in the wings and wait for my cue. And when that comes, whatever, just basically as soon as you leave from the wings, or you, like, all of a sudden you cross into the sight lines, as they're called, when you walk on stage, that has to be on your dominant foot. And that's how because if you enter the stage on your weaker foot, your performance is not going to be as strong as it could be. That's where that comes from.
I couldn't even, I think my left side's stronger than my right side because I'm left-handed.
Right.
So I guess I would leave my dressing room with my right foot and then go on stage with my left foot.
Yes. But some people, there are that, and I do remember hearing that a couple of times. There's another one, we'll get into it at the end of this, but let me, I've got two more. If you've ever seen a production and someone walks up to the front of the stage and puts flowers in front of an actor, or the leading lady a bouquet of roses, or they, just give flowers. That comes after the show. To give flowers to an actor before the show is considered bad luck. Where that comes from in the psychology of it, it's like, if you start giving an actor these accolades and positive strokes before the show, they are going to get complacent. Mm-hmm. So it's like, give them that after they've done the job, not before. In the old times, what would happen is that at the very final performance of the run of a show, the actors would go into a graveyard and they would gather flowers from the graveyard and give it to the director, symbolizing this is the end of the show. Mm. If you could not give them the flowers from the graveyard prior to the show, because that would signal that the production is over and anything can go wrong.
Is that the first night, or that's the very last
night?
The
very, very last night after the show. That's when flowers, particularly in the old days, the flowers they gathered from the graveyard.
So you've got comes that at the finality.
Very end. I can actually remember the opera that I was at, the giant, huge, massive opera I was involved in many years ago, Bianca I Faliero. I remembering the director, Francesca Zambalo, this wonderful, wonderful director. I love that lady so much.
You've mentioned her a few times.
She and one other lady, Mary Ellen O'Brien. I'll to go off on a tangent for 30 seconds. Those two ladies were such a huge inspiration to me, and I just, to this day, I still love and respect them and had learned so much from them. And I want to be like them when I grow up. But anyway, I can still remember Francesca came on stage at the very last production. She was wearing the evening gown, and that's when, everybody who was involved, that's when they were given flowers on the final curtain call of the run of that production. And another one, and this is something that actually kind of goes across cultures in general, no peacock feathers on stage. The reason being is, if you know what a peacock feather looks like, and at the end it sort of looks like an eye. Some people, not just in theater, but in some cultures long, long ago, it was, if you were given peacock feathers, it was synonymous with getting the evil eye.
Oh, I could see that because of the way peacock feathers look. Interesting.
There's that.
Yeah, there's quite a few cultures that are very tied into the evil eye.
Now, okay, so the two big ones. Saying break a leg. If you were in a dance company or if you were in opera, it wasn't necessarily break a leg. I remember they would say merde, which basically means
French, yeah.
Which basically means let's keep the language on a G rating here. Let's just say it means poo-poos.
Yes.
Okay. And basically, before someone goes on stage, rather than saying good luck, you say hope everything goes badly, and then all of the
take a dump
spirits that would potentially bring bad luck and failure upon a production, you've kind of like circumvented that. Another thing I remember hearing was toy toy. Where that saying comes from, I don't know, but it was break a leg, merit, and toy toy. It's just, and there was kind of like this, and it's kind of sad, in my opinion, when somebody says, if I say good luck to somebody, all the evil powers are going to conspire against me. And so I'm just going to head them off. But that to me is actually a very sad psychology of I say something positive, all of the negative energies are going to conspire and rain down on me. So there is that.
All right. So I also did some additional research on that. It's thought that the term likely originated in German, and then the English
that
expression.
Figures.
Yeah.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, there you go. And it was first attributed in the 30s or possibly the 20s. What some people think it was is that when you had German-speaking performers who were Jewish that came in and started working in the entertainment industry, that was something that they brought to it. And again, we're talking the 20s or the 30s, more than like. It was a Yiddish-German pun theory. So that's sort of what that was. The Hals- und Beinbruch, neck and bone break. So then, if you know Yiddish is rather whimsical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun, when you're like, schmilkes, schmuck, things like that. So,
Schlemazel.
Yeah. The Irish writer Robert Wilson Lund published an article in Defense of Superstition in 1921, and he regarded theater as the second most superstitious institution in England after horse racing.
Well, if a horse falls down and breaks a leg, that's the end of that horse.
That sadly is.
And just, jockeys can get, if something goes wrong, God forbid, that's the end of that person's career.
Yeah, so that's where he suspects that just came from. When you did have people from Europe coming over who were German-speaking Jewish immigrants, that they brought that with them. So that would have been after World War I. One interesting thing, Edna Ferber's 1939 autobiography, A Particular Treasure, she writes about the fascination in theater of all understudies sitting in the back row politely wishing various principals would break a leg. Again, having worked in theater,
why does that not surprise me a bit,
Yeah. I want my big break. They need to break a leg.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I get that. Bernard Sobel's 1948 Theater Handbook and Digest of Plays describes theatrical superstitions before a performance. Actors never wish each other good luck, but I hope you break a leg. These are some other popular but implausible theories, and one of them I always thought was what it meant. Performer bowing. The term break a leg may refer to a performer bowing or curtsying to the audience in a metaphorical sense of bending one's leg to do so. The performer breaking the leg line. Now, this I think is very interesting. When you were talking about that earlier, the edge of the stage is just beyond the vantage point of the audience, and it forms a line. The imaginary actually marked that can be referred as a leg line, named after a type of concealing stage curtain, the leg. For an unpaid standby performer to cross or break this line would mean that the performer was getting an opportunity to go on stage to be paid. Therefore, breaking that leg line, to break it might have shifted for a specific hope for this outcome. But it's less plausible that it could originally express the hope that the enthusiastic audience repeatedly calls for bows or encores. So again, these are not necessarily what would be the break a leg, but some other theories about how it might have become part of the language.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, now that you mention it.
The allusion to David Garrick during a performance of Shakespeare's Richard III, the famed 18th century British actor David Garrick became so entranced in the performance that he's supposedly unaware of a literal fracture in his leg. And then the audience chair legs. Various folk theories propose that Elizabethan or even ancient Greek theater audiences either stomped their literal legs or banged chairs' legs to express applause. So they were breaking those legs.
Yeah.
And then this is how I thought it was the allusion to John Wilkes Booth. that the phrase from the 1865 assassination, during which John Wilkes Booth, the actor turned assassin, claimed in his diary that he broke his leg leaping to the stage of Ford's Theater after murdering the president, which is interesting because he died like maybe 10 days later when we did our podcast, A Tale of Two Booths. So it was like 10 or 12 days later. But actors didn't start wishing each other to break a leg until the early 20s, more than 50 years later. So that's pretty unlikely. But yeah, that's just, people will say that now. We'll use that. It's become pretty much part of our lexicon. If you want to say, hey, break a leg, go out there, break a leg.
Yeah.
And people don't get offended by it. But I just thought some of the background in the history. So it's really one that, just to make sure that you're not using that incorrectly. So that's kind of fun. Now,
then there's the big one.
The big one. Are we not mentioning the Scottish play in the room?
Let me just say, okay, this is the big theater superstition.
This is probably, I would say, the biggest one.
Yeah,
and when you look at the history, pretty good reasons.
All right, let me just say this. Even to this day, I remember it's a Shakespeare play that if you were in a theater, it is referred to as the Scottish tragedy.
Or the Scottish play.
The Scottish play. And so, listen, if you are in a theater right now, just bear in mind, I'm going to say the actual name of the Scottish play. So,
disclaimer.
So either, if you have that superstition or people around you, either put this on pause and go listen to it outside or something like that. Yep. But you do not say Macbeth. Dun, dun, unless you are on stage performing in the play. Otherwise, you do not. And I mean, there are people, I remember people, particularly when I was doing the couple of Shakespeare plays that I'd done, you do not say Macbeth. Otherwise, these people, I guess the term would be, they would become apoplectic about it, scared to death.
There's actually a hilarious Blackadder sketch.
The Blackadder, the old British comedy show, The Blackadder, which, if y'all are theater nuts like we are, you really should, if you can find the old episodes of Blackadder, Rowan Atkinson was the lead character in that. Blackadder was the family name, and sort of followed the generations of the Blackadder family. And there was one one of the Blackadder characters was the assistant to a prince who had to make a public speech, but he was very uncomfortable with public speaking. So he goes down to the local theater and finds a couple of basically obnoxious, pompous, narcissistic, alcoholic Shakespearean actors to coach him in his speech. And it's some of the funniest. I mean, particularly if you ever spent any time doing theater and you run into these pompous, egotistical donkeys, shall we say, it was hysterical. I mean, it's like, you mean the actors actually rehearse? They don't just get drunk, put on a silly hat, and trust their best guess? And the character Blackadder had just nothing but just disdain for these actors because they were just...
They were bloody awful.
They were terrible, and they had egos the size of Texas and all that stuff. And so they got into one scene, in one iteration of the superstition is that if somebody says Macbeth in the theater, you have to step outside the dressing room, turn around 3 times, say piss pot, and then walk back in the dressing room.
And then sometimes slap that other person.
And then there was all that sort of a thing. So they get into this one scene to where it's like Blackadder's like, oh, so you mean we shouldn't say Macbeth in the theater? And they would go, you can't say Macbeth. It's like, and he would have them running in and out. And he was basically dropping the word Macbeth every chance he got. And the actors were getting more and more frantic and distressed and frightened and pissed off and everything. And he's like, Macbeth. Oh, you mean Macbeth? But of course, you shouldn't say Macbeth or any other play that has anything like Macbeth. And they would just run out of the room and turning around 3 times and saying piss pot and just getting more and more frantic about it. It was pretty hysterical. But, and I know you got a bunch of information about this, but the most common things that they say that this superstition has persisted as long as it has is if you know the play, there's 3 witches and the double boil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble and it's because of those witches that basically Macbeth meets them and they foretell him of all this stuff that's going to happen, and give him all these omens and things. It's because of the presence of these witches as characters. They think that's one reason why the play is cursed, and also for the fact that I don't know, I wasn't there, but supposedly there was thought that William Shakespeare himself was involved in the occult and in witchcraft and the black arts and so on and so forth. And that is one reason why they suspect that there's such negative connotations for just saying the word Macbeth.
Yeah. In fact, the traditional origin is said to be a curse set upon the play by a coven of witches angry at Shakespeare for using a real spell.
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting, another hypothesis, is the origin of the superstitions that Macbeth, being a popular play, was commonly put on by theaters in financial trouble, and that the high production costs of Macbeth put theaters had a problem with their finances, and then it became Macbeth and theaters going out of business. Maybe if it's a good production.
I mean, I may be completely wrong about this, but I think the Scottish play has got one of the smallest casts of Shakespeare.
And it's one of the shortest.
It's one of the shortest, and it's one I've seen where you can have actors actually doubling up on parts.
And there's actually, just as far as like the very beginning, apparently the legend is that, because in Shakespearean theater, you did not have women on stage.
Yes, there's that. Yeah.
And so you had the young man who played Lady McB actually died.
Mm-hmm.
Either before the performance or during the performance, and the legend is Shakespeare himself had to step in and play for the rest of the performance.
Yeah.
So right then and there, you had death associated with it. There's the 1849 Astor Place riot. What happened was there were dueling productions in New York City, and it caused the riot in 1849. Actually leaving 25 people dead and hundreds injured. So that is just crazy. In a 1937 Old Vic production, a 25-pound bag from the curtains almost fell on Laurence Olivier.
Basically.
Yeah, almost missed him by inches. And then the English actor Harold Norman was mortally wounded in a sword fight during a performance of Macbeth at London's Repertory Theatre in 1947, and then he died in the hospital 3 weeks later. On December 2nd, 1964, a fire burned down the Maria National Theatre in Lisbon, Portugal. At the time, the play being shown was Macbeth. In 1980, a production of Macbeth at the Old Vic starring Peter O'Toole is referred to as Macbeth. It was reviewed so badly that the theater company disbanded shortly after the play.
Oh, boy.
Now, you see, I think that's user error.
That had to have been a real stinkeroo, kids, I'll tell you
Because
what.
Peter O'Toole, he knew stuff.
Yeah.
He really knew stuff. And then mishaps on the set of the film opera led director Dario Argento to believe that the film had been affected by the Macbeth curse, that the opera being performed within the film is Verdi's Macbeth. And then in 1988, a Belgian singer committed suicide during a nationally broadcast matinee of Verdi's opera, Macbeth. He propelled himself backwards from a balcony railing at the Metropolitan Opera in Lincoln Square.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So...
And when they were still broadcasting it on National Public Radio, I would listen to the opera on Saturday afternoons.
I remember that.
You
love that.
My Saturday afternoons was like, I'm listening to the opera, guys. But just to, hear that, wow.
Yeah, that's really sad. So, again, and I think probably I mentioned this to you, the most recent case that people are attributing to this is
Denzel
at the 94th Academy Awards. Chris Rock congratulated Denzel Washington on his performance in the tragedy of Macbeth, saying the name of the Scottish play aloud in the Dolby Theatre. What happened after that? I think everything was fine.
I think you might have heard about this.
Yeah, moments later, Rock was slapped by Will Smith after making a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. Viewers, including playwright Lynn Nottage, quickly took to social media to joke that Rock had suffered the curse of the Scottish play. I don't know that.
There you have it, kids.
You
Draw
don't
your own
know,
conclusions.
but, just be very careful what one says in theaters. Now, if you do want to cleanse, and let's say somebody is doing that, it does go beyond piss pot. If you run outside, these are actually 3 lines from Shakespearean plays, because I was always told that. And then when I tried looking up piss pot, there wasn't anything that I could find.
Oh, there's so many variations and deviations on how you counteract the curse of Macbeth, supposedly.
So what you would do is run around 3 times, or turn around 3 times. A line from Hamlet is, "Angels and ministers of grace defend us." That is from Act 1, Scene 4. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck saying, "If we shadows have offended," I believe that's his last speech. That's Act 5, Scene 2.
That's the one that I remember.
Yeah, so if we shadows have offended, turn around 3 times and say that.
Yeah. I think that if I remember correctly, that is Puck's last speech. I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, just FYI, as far as Shakespeare goes, Max and I actually fell in love doing A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yes, we did.
You were Oberon to my Titania.
Yes.
And then Fair Thoughts and Happy Hours attend on you, and that is from The Merchant of Venice, and that is Act 3, Scene 4. And when I look at Happy Hours, I'm like, okay, so we're going to cocktail it up after that. But so that is one way to counteract that. So again, hopefully if you were in the theater, you have already left, realizing that we were going to be talking about the Scottish tragedy, and that you would do that. But it is very interesting, just actors, because I think so often what you hear, and acting people will tell you it can be talent, but honestly, so much of it is luck.
It's luck and timing.
It's luck and timing. It's being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And hey, we joke about the standard rich and famous contract, but sometimes, someone may have broken a leg and you happen to look like that actor, and you might be able to jump in and do that. And that literally could be your big break because somebody else had a break. So I think from that, actors really, really do feel that there's a lot of mojo, there's luck, there's karma out there. So, you just, what I would say just as an actor, you can get caught up in superstitions. And if you get too caught up, you're going to be afraid to step outside your door.
Oh, yeah.
Do I cross my threshold? Do I do this? Do I do that? Right now, we have got a black cat looking out the window as we do this podcast.
There he is.
And he is adorable. Now, there would be people freaking out, if they saw who he was. But, my feeling is, live your life, do your art, and just do the best you can. And, I think that's all any of us can do.
Yeah. And one thing I remember also, I'll just throw this little bit in at the very end, the final line of Hamlet, "Good night, sweet prince, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." I remember, coming across like a dead bird or a dead animal laying in I was like, "Good night, sweet prince, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." And whenever I've ever been around anyone who has just passed, I always said, "Good night, sweet princess, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." I just sort of automatically come out with that. And it always, and every time I do that, I can't help but feel like there's some kind of, I guess, like a very special, kind of like a celestial vibration sort of enters into it to just kind of wish the spirit all the best for whatever the next parts of their journey holds for their soul or their afterlife, or whatever you wish to believe about that. Yeah, and the thing also, just as far as these superstitions, and I think the reason that they've, been around so long is so many people have used them. And whether or not they are total and complete crap, or there's some truth to them or whatever, the fact of the matter is, over time, hundreds of years, many hundreds of years in some instances, people keep going back to it and paying attention to these superstitions and abiding by them, either because it's tradition or it's something they really feel is going to have a positive effect on the mechanisms of the production or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, energy flows where attention goes. And if you keep coming back to these, break a leg and just don't say McB, say the Scottish play or whatever, or, stepping on stage with your right foot first, or any of that stuff. The fact that what gives them so much strength and so much perseverance and longevity is that people keep paying attention to them. People keep doing it. And these superstitions, these customs, these old wives' tales, or whatever you wish to call them, they just continue to gain strength and momentum. And that's why they continue to stick around with us all these years and decades and centuries later. And
I will say this, I thought was kind of funny, is Patrick Stewart on a radio, Jean-Luc Picard, definitely someone who has done, and I'm would tend to think Brian Cox, but Patrick Stewart said, if you have played the role of the Scottish Thane, then you are allowed to say the title anytime, anywhere. So, and I'm like, okay, dude, you got the street cred to do that.
Yeah, he kind of does.
And, we'll end on a positive note. Billy Wilder would work quite a bit with Jack Lemmon. And Jack Lemmon would always say before he went on stage or before a scene started, he would say to himself, magic time, magic time. And that just would, so I really love that.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, we are going to make magic. We're going to make fun. We're going to take people on a journey with these characters. And to keep in mind, Jack Lemmon did The Odd Couple, but he also did The Days of Wine and Roses, which is a pretty serious movie. It's an amazing piece of acting. But even with that, and I think Billy Wilder did, and then Some Like It Hot also. So, the guy had some range, but I just love that whether it was something dramatic, whether he was playing an down on his luck alcoholic with his wife or, playing Daphne, and Some Like It Hot, he'd always start with magic time. So if that's a superstition or something positive that you want to give yourself, even just saying, hey, magic time, I'm going to create magic. I think it just lifts your energy and you just feel like you can do it.
Or Bob Fosse, showtime.
Showtime or magic time. So anyway, I hope this has been educational. I hope you've had fun. We had fun kind of delving into this again. We're kind of supernatural nerds. And then for the show that will be dropping the day before Halloween, we are going to talk about ghosts in the theater.
I got a ghost story for you kids.
I've got a few, and there's actually, trust me, we could probably just do strictly a podcast on haunted theaters.
Oh yeah,
that would be that. But we'll just do this one. We'll probably come back to it because we do know some ghost hunters and people like that. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I hope it was enlightening. I hope it gave you something to think about.
Yes, indeed, guys. Thank you so much for listening. This is podcast number 26 for us. So.
Yeah, so we're at like 6 months. We're halfway through the year, and we just have fun doing it. So hopefully you have fun listening.
I've got a legal sheet full of ideas for future podcasts. But just to finish off here, if you guys have anything you'd like us to look into, anything to delve into and research and talk about, please feel free to. Contact us and
whether it's acting or not acting, that's cool.
We really appreciate you guys for sticking with us and listening to what we have to say, and just thank you very, very much.
All right, guys, thank you so much, and we will touch base again next time.
Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.